Beloved, hear me. The greatest escapes are never acts of sudden rebellion. They are born in the hidden chambers of the soul, rehearsed in the silence long before the first step is taken. Like a prisoner who studies the pattern of footsteps outside his cell, counting the seconds between each passing guard, the chosen ones prepare their liberation in the unseen. In the world of men, those who break free from chains often labor in secret for months, even years, crafting each detail while the world believes they are content behind their bars. Every tunnel is dug without a whisper. Every tool is hidden in plain sight. Every routine of the captor is memorized until the moment of release arrives. Yet, I tell you, in this hour, your captivity was not made of stone walls or iron doors. It was woven from the strands of their control over you, from the constant press of manipulation, from the subtle shaping of your thoughts, until you began to believe the cage was a home. But something holy began to stir in you, while they were speaking over you as though they owned your breath. You were already writing the blueprint of freedom in the secret place of your mind. You were not merely planning to leave. You were staging a divine exodus. You became the silent architect of your own release, building corridors of escape with the precision of one who knows there is more beyond the gate. And as they walked past you, confident you would never step beyond their reach, you dismantled the bridge between you without letting a single plank cry out beneath your feet. They imagined that if you ever tried to go, their net would catch you, but you did not stumble through their trap. You made them question if the net had ever been real. They believed so deeply in your captivity that they never saw you walking out the door with your crown already engraved for the greatest disappearing act heaven has ever witnessed. You did not run with noise or rage. There were no shouts in the night, no slamming of doors to announce your departure. Instead, you moved with such precision and grace that even the secret agencies of the earth could take notes from your strategy. If a man like Bond had been given your gift of patience and timing, the stories of his triumph would end in half the pages. What you carried out was not an escape in the eyes of the flesh, but a holy operation in the realm of the spirit. You did not slip away by chance. You were led out by wisdom, guarded by vision, and clothed in the invisibility of purpose. And now, as the dust of your departure settles, they are left staring into the space you once filled, unable to name the day or the hour when the grip was broken, yet knowing with certainty that something eternal shifted, and the one they thought they owned has become untouchable. Freedom, my friend, is never secured by the loud swing of a sword alone. It is won by starving the enemy of the very power they feed upon. You knew that those who thrive on control do not simply release their grip when asked. If you had torn yourself away in a single violent motion, they would have risen in a storm of retaliation, calling your name in accusation, twisting words, sowing suspicion, and trying to set the world against you. They would have chased you into your next season, like a shadow determined to blot out the sun. So you chose a wiser way. You began to starve the parasite before cutting the cord. You no longer served their ego, the feast it had grown accustomed to. You did not pour your emotions onto their table for them to devour. You refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing you break under their pressure. It began quietly. You no longer rushed to answer their calls. Your words grew shorter, your tone less urgent, your enthusiasm restrained. You stopped offering them a window into every corner of your life. You trained your spirit to remain steady and unmoved when they prodded you with their familiar weapons. Where they expected anger, they found calm. Where they sought tears, they found stillness. And with each unshaken moment, the grip loosened. The flow of energy they once drew from you became a slow trickle, and then a drought. They lived for the constant drama, the endless validation, the predictable reaction, but you were closing the gates. They did not even notice at first, because you made the change so gradually, so subtly, that it felt to them like nothing more than a shift in the weather. This was not an act of revenge. It was strategy born from wisdom. You were creating a landscape where your absence would not provoke a violent pursuit. The day you would step away was already set in the heavens, but before that day came, you ensured they were already living without the best of you, and in living without it, their strength over you diminished with every passing sunrise. They told themselves you were distracted, perhaps caught in a passing mood. They could not see that you were cutting wires one by one, pulling out every root they had planted in your heart. By the time the final cord was severed, there was nothing left for them to cling to. You walked away not from a garden, but from a barren field, a wasteland they could not revive. And now, in the emptiness where they once drank deeply from your soul, they are left scavenging for memories, feasting only on shadows of the person you used to be. What they do not understand is that person no longer exists for them. There is a strange blindness that comes with arrogance. Those who believe they own you rarely guard the doors through which you will one day leave. They were so convinced that you would never escape their grasp that they unknowingly cleared the path for your departure. Their pride became your shelter. Their overconfidence, the very cloak that hid your movements. You knew how to let their ego work for you. You allowed them to believe the script had not changed, that you were still following the same cues, still bowing to the same commands. You did not openly challenge their dominance, for you understood that to strike too soon is to alert the guard before the gate is unlocked. Instead, you studied them in silence. You noted when their eyes were fixed elsewhere, when their attention drifted, when the storms of their own making distracted them. You memorized the moments when their grip loosened, without their knowledge, the spaces in their vigilance where light could enter. They thought they knew your boundaries. They thought they knew your limits. They believed that you would always move, as you always had. But you had already begun to walk on a different road, one they could neither see nor imagine. Every blind spot in their awareness became a doorway in your escape plan. You found openings not because they were careless, but because their certainty made them careless. This is the great flaw of those intoxicated with control. They imagine it to be permanent, and so, while they were building walls around you, you were mapping every crack in the foundation. They could not conceive that the loyalty they counted on was already hollow, that the version of you they thought they commanded was no longer standing before them. The day you finally stepped away, their shock was not just at your absence, but at the revelation that they had been living beside a stranger for far longer than they realized. Even now, they search for the moment when the shift occurred. They turn over memories like stones, hunting for the first sign that the ground beneath them had begun to tremble. But there is no single moment for them to find. Your departure was not a sudden storm. It was the quiet erosion of their control, grain by grain, until the fortress they thought was unbreakable collapsed in silence. This is why their defeat burns so deeply. You did not run from their power. You dismantled it while they were still drunk on the belief that they held you fast. You did not just walk away. You walked out from a prison they never knew was crumbling, and you did it so completely that they are left holding only the memory of their own illusion. Before the body ever moves, The mind must be set free. Long before you took a single step toward the door, the real battle was fought in the inner court of your thoughts. It was there that you dethroned them from the place they believed they occupied in your soul. They had been a constant voice in your mind, a presence weighing upon your decisions, a shadow over your joy. But one by one, you began to silence their words until only your own voice remained, stronger and clearer than it had ever been. At first, the changes were almost invisible to anyone but you. You resisted the urge to check the screen every time their message appeared. You stopped replaying their criticisms in the stillness of the night. You no longer felt the need to explain yourself when they demanded an account of your every move. Each small victory was a thread cut, each refusal a chain broken. This inner transformation was your true liberation. Once you no longer needed their approval, their praise, or even their understanding. The ground of their power collapsed beneath them. Their opinions, once thunder in your ears, became distant, murmurs easily dismissed. Their judgments could no longer pierce you because you no longer received them as truth. And as this new strength took root, something shifted in the spirit. You were no longer waiting for permission to breathe, to speak, to live. You had already claimed it. The physical act of leaving was not a leap into uncertainty, but the natural outflow of a soul that had already stepped into the open air. They never saw this victory forming because you did not parade it before them. You did not shout your independence from the rooftops. It grew in silence, fed by prayer, guarded by wisdom, and sustained by the quiet knowledge that your worth was no longer in their hands. When you finally walked away, they lost more than your presence. They lost the crown they thought they wore in your life. The invisible throne they believed they occupied was shattered, and they could not comprehend why the room felt empty, even when you still stood in it. This is the difference between an escape born of desperation and a departure born of transformation. The desperate flee in the hope of healing later. The transformed leave because the healing has already come. You walked away whole, your mind no longer in chains, your spirit no longer bowed, your heart no longer seeking what they could never give. By the time your footsteps carried you into a new life, they were already speaking into an empty chamber. The echo of their control could find no wall to cling to, no heart to inhabit, no mind to capture. You had become free in the most complete way, and they were left with the realization that they could never reach you again, not because of distance, but because the door to your soul had been closed forever. There came a moment when you understood that the most powerful way to protect your freedom was to guard your life like a sacred scroll. You stopped broadcasting every movement, every feeling, every plan. They had long thrived on knowing where you stood, what you felt, what you were preparing to do. Information had been their currency, and as long as you gave it freely, they could buy their way back into your mind whenever they pleased. But you closed the gates. You did not close them out of fear. You closed them out of wisdom. You realized that the most important works of your life must be built behind the curtain, away from eyes that would only seek to tear them down. You stopped offering your emotions as an open book for them to read. You stopped giving updates that served as blueprints for sabotage. From the outside, you may have seemed quieter, perhaps even distant, but in truth, you were becoming stronger, building in the hidden place a life that no one could dismantle. They could still see you standing there, but you had become like a sealed vessel, carrying something they could no longer touch. This transformation into a private treasure was not about secrecy for its own sake. It was about reclaiming the authority over your own story. You understood that every moment you shared with them was a seed they could twist into a thorn. So you shared nothing that could be weaponized. You allowed them to see only what you chose, and what you chose was nothing that could harm the work God was doing in you. They became restless, unsure, and increasingly powerless. Without the constant flow of details to feed on, their influence began to wither. They could no longer predict your steps, and in that uncertainty, their control began to collapse. In the hidden place, your plans were taking shape. Your future was unfolding with precision, and because they could not see it, they could not stop it. You moved like a shadow that could not be tracked, a flame shielded from the wind, burning brighter than ever. By the time you stepped into the next chapter, everything of value had already been secured beyond their reach. Your relationships, your dreams, your healing, your joy, these had been moved into a realm where their words could not corrupt and their hands could not reach. And in that quiet victory, you discovered a truth that will carry you for the rest of your life. The most unshakable freedom is not just walking away from what holds you, it is becoming untouchable in spirit, a living sanctuary guarded by the wisdom to keep what is holy out of the reach of those who would profane it. There was a season when you learned the sacred art of choosing your battles. You came to see that not every skirmish was worth your breath, not every accusation deserved an answer, and not every argument required your voice. They lived for these battles, drawing you into endless cycles where the goal was never resolution but exhaustion. Every time you fought to prove yourself, they won something far greater than the point of the argument. They won access to your energy. So you laid down your sword in the small fights to save your strength for the greater war. You let them think they had the last word, not because they were right, but because the true victory was in your restraint. When they hurled their provocations, you chose silence. When they twisted your words, you chose stillness. You let them sit in the false glow of imagined triumph, all the while building your way to the moment that truly mattered. This was not surrender. It was a higher form of warfare. You understood that in battles with the small-minded, the greatest weapon is the refusal to engage on their terms. Every step back you took from the noise was a step forward into freedom. You conserved your strength, keeping it untouched and ready for the day you would break their grip completely. While they thought they were winning by silencing you in the moment, you were winning by refusing to be pulled into their chaos. Their temporary satisfaction blinded them to the truth that you were no longer giving them the emotional reaction that had been their fuel. And then the day came when the real war was decided in a single move. It was not a shouted confrontation. It was not a dramatic declaration. It was the quiet, unshakable decision to step away entirely. When you made that move, every petty argument, every manipulative tactic, every false victory they thought they had gained crumbled to dust. You left them with the illusion of having won battles. While you claimed the war without contest, they could not even trace the moment when the tide had turned, because you had been turning it in silence for so long. By the time they realized what had happened, you were already gone, standing in a place they could not enter, possessing a peace they could not disturb. This is the wisdom that only the chosen learn, that sometimes the greatest act of power is to let the other side believe they have prevailed, while in truth you have already removed yourself from the game entirely. You walked away not as the defeated, but as the victor who chose not to waste a crown on proving a point. You also understood that freedom is not just about leaving, it is about leaving at the appointed time. You knew there is danger in moving too soon, when the eyes of the captor are sharp and the grip is strong, so you waited, like a watchman studying the horizon for the perfect moment when the gates would be unguarded. You watched as their attention shifted to other matters, as their hunger for control found new distractions. Perhaps it was the pursuit of another to dominate. Perhaps it was the storms of their own consuming their focus. Or perhaps it was the comfort of believing you were still theirs. You waited without impatience, knowing that timing is the hidden key to victory. A premature step could have ignited a chase, but the right step at the right hour would be unstoppable. So you remained outwardly calm, moving through your days as though nothing had changed, while within you the plans of freedom were already complete. When the moment came, it was not marked by fanfare. There was no alarm in their camp, no sudden tightening of the net. You left like the tide receding in the night, unnoticed until the shore was bare. Your absence did not come as an explosion, but as a quiet vanishing, so seamless that by the time they looked for you, you were already far beyond their reach. They could not rally their forces because they did not realize the battle had been lost until long after the field was empty. Their hands grasped at air. Their calls met silence. Their strategies collapsed before they could even be set in motion. You had slipped through in the one window when they were least prepared to hold you. This was the brilliance of your departure. Not only that you left, but that you left when the very circumstances conspired to make you invisible. It was the moment when their arrogance lulled them into carelessness, when their focus turned away, when their guard was down, and in that space you walked free. To those who do not understand the ways of wisdom, it might look like coincidence, but you know it was more. It was the convergence of preparation and providence, of patience and divine timing. It was the moment heaven had set aside for your deliverance, and you stepped into it with the quiet certainty of one who knows the way has been cleared. You did not just escape. You moved in harmony with the unseen hand that opens doors no one can shut, and shuts doors no one can open. And because you left at the appointed time, there was no chain strong enough, no voice loud enough, no net wide enough to pull you back. Long before your body crossed the threshold, your heart had already departed. You became a presence they could no longer touch, an echo they could no longer summon. They might have had your number saved, but by the time they dialed, it was as though they were calling into an empty valley. The sound of their voice no longer found a way into your soul. This was not coldness for the sake of pride, nor distance for the sake of punishment. It was the holy discipline of closing the gates of your heart to the one who had used its doors as chains. You began to remove every invisible thread they had tied to you. No more reactions to their guilt. No more waves of anger to feed their hunger. No more tears for them to interpret as victory. You built within yourself a fortress, its walls high and unyielding, its gates locked to manipulation. Inside this sanctuary, the peace of God became your guard, and the voice of truth became your only counsel. When they tried to provoke you, they met the stillness of stone. When they tried to pull at your emotions, they found no rope to hold. They grew desperate because they could no longer read the weather of your soul. And without that forecast, their power was gone. You had cut the leash they once gripped so tightly, not by force, but by letting it fall from their hands until they grasped only air. And so, when the day of your physical departure came, it was only the final step in a journey already complete. You had been gone for a long time, gone from the place where their words could wound, gone from the space where their judgment could weigh on you, gone from the web where your compassion could be used as a snare. They did not lose you when you walked away. They lost you when you ceased to be emotionally available for their control. This is why your freedom is unshakable. They can send messages into the void, but the void will not answer. They can attempt to replay old memories, but those memories have no door into your present. You have stepped into a place where they cannot follow, because it is not measured in distance, but in transformation. What you did was more than leaving. You became unreachable in the most vital way. You made yourself invisible to the nets of the past, untouchable to the chains of manipulation, unseen to the eyes that once watched your every move. And now, as you stand in this open space, they can only search the horizon, never finding you. Because you are no longer where they left you, you are where they will never be able to arrive. You did not step into freedom with empty hands. While many flee with nothing but the hope of survival, you carried with you the sacred record of truth. In the chambers of your mind, you kept the ledger every betrayal, every subtle twist of words, every violation of trust, not to feed bitterness, but to preserve clarity. You understood that forgetting would be the snare that pulls so many back. Without that remembrance, the heart can be deceived by nostalgia, the mind can rewrite the story in softer tones, and the soul can wander dangerously close to the chains it escaped. So you carried your truth like a compass that always pointed away from the prison. You did not embellish it. You did not parade it for others to see. You held it quietly, as a fire hidden beneath the coals, its heat reminding you why you could never return. You knew that exposing every detail to the world would only give them another arena to twist your story, another chance to pull you into their theater of deception. This discipline kept you from the temptation to justify your choice to those who would never understand it. You needed no jury to confirm your freedom. The only court that mattered had already ruled, and heaven had signed the decree. Your silence was not weakness, it was mastery. By refusing to scatter the full truth before those who could not carry it, you protected your peace. You shielded your healing from the chaos of their rebuttals. You denied them the opportunity to shape the narrative one last time, and because you did not return to defend yourself, the past remained sealed. They are left with fragments, with unanswered questions, with the discomfort of never knowing how much you saw or understood. That uncertainty is the shadow that follows them now, a constant reminder that they did not just lose you, they lost the control over the story. Every step you take forward is a witness to the truth you hold. You do not need to speak it aloud, because it is written in the way you walk, in the peace that covers you, in the light that surrounds you. Your life itself has become the testimony, and no accusation can erase what has been set in motion. This is why your freedom will endure, because it was not built on denial or forgetfulness. It was built on the unshakable foundation of remembering clearly, seeing rightly, and refusing to let the past dress itself in the clothes of false redemption. You left with your eyes wide open, and that clarity will keep you from ever walking back into the shadows. In the end, you denied them the one thing they craved most: closure. They wanted the final conversation, the last scene where they could perform their sorrow, twist the truth, and pull you once more into the orbit of their control. They desired the farewell that would serve as their stage, where they could cast themselves as the wounded or the righteous. But you knew the danger hidden in that word. You understood that what they called closure was only another chain, another negotiation over your freedom. so you refused to give it. You locked the door they expected to walk through, and you walked away without waiting for permission. This was not cruelty. It was protection. You knew that some stories are not meant to be wrapped neatly, that some endings must remain unfinished in their eyes, so that your beginning can be complete in yours, and you did not leave into emptiness. You had already been building the life that awaited you, a place they could not touch, a future they could not sabotage. Long before you stepped away, you had gathered the stones for a stronger foundation. You had sown seeds in richer soil, prepared a table in a land beyond their reach, and built walls that no accusation could breach. When you walked out, you were not stepping into the unknown. You were stepping into the inheritance you had been preparing in secret. And because you had built it away from their sight, they could not poison it. They may still search for the old you, the predictable one, the one who played by their rules, but that person is gone. You have become the unexpected, the untraceable, the ungovernable. They cannot plot against what they cannot see. They cannot dismantle what they cannot touch. They cannot win against one who no longer plays their game. And so you leave them with their questions, with their restless grasping at a past that has been burned away. You do not look back because your eyes are fixed forward, on the wide horizon where the light of your new life breaks through. You carry no chains, no cords, no open doors for them to return through. This is the crown of your journey, not simply that you are free, but that you are unshakably established in a place they cannot enter. Your victory is not loud, but it is eternal. It is written in heaven, sealed by the one who leads the captives out and seats them in places of peace. And now, with your wings spread and your path clear, you walk into the life you were always meant to live, untouchable, unstoppable, and wholly your own.